All right, here we are, week number 4, family project, titled, For This Reason. Have you ever wondered about that? What does that mean? For this reason. When Scripture says, for this reason, what does that mean? When he said that, when God said that, he had just created woman. He had just brought together a suitable companion for man. The beauty of marriage is that it's a commentary on the completion or fulfillment of humanity. As we've been talking about, that the role of the husband, the role of the wife, neither one is more important than the other. They are equally valued. They are equally important because without one, there is no completion. But the two together complete. There is a completing that takes place. Adam said these very poetic words. You know, when you look at Scripture, you look at all the Psalms, and David wrote some beautiful stuff. Solomon wrote some beautiful stuff. We have some great poetry in Scripture. But some of the greatest poetry that's ever written was what Adam said. When he said, she is bone of my bone. She is flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of me. She is a part of me. She completes me. And that's what he's talking about there. When he says, now finally, I am complete. I'm whole. Man, I tell you what, ladies, you don't get no better than that. I don't know what you're looking for, but it don't get no better than that. For a man to understand that he is completed with you, for you to understand that you are completed by him. And God designed that. He built that. He put that in our DNA. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. How many of you, I know all of you are not involved in our life groups right now, so you haven't had a chance to see the video. But those of you that are in life groups and you've seen the video this week, how many of you caught this statement? Dinah's going to throw it up on the screen for you. Marriage is making a promise about something you know nothing about. You remember seeing that? Man, when I saw that, I thought that is so true, and it's real. I mean, all that you know when you get married is that you don't believe you can live without this person. That's all you know. When a couple walks down the aisle and they have their wedding, the only thing they know in that moment is, I can't live without this person. I got to have this girl. I got to have this man. I mean, I can't breathe if they're not with me. That's all you know at that point, right? You're clueless. You don't have a clue as to what's coming. You're getting ready to enter into a covenant, into a promise that you don't know anything about. Now, you don't know what the future holds for you. You don't know if it's going to be for better or for worse. You don't know if it's going to be for rich or for poor. You don't know if it's going to be in sickness and in health. You don't know what's coming. But you're making a commitment. You're making a promise to something you don't know what's going to come. When two people come to the decision to get married, they do so because they found themselves in love. They're just crazy about each other. And so they come together with this amazing desire to be with each other, and it just drives them crazy. And I know there are cases where people get married when they feel like that they have been pressured into it by someone or something. And I know, but that's rare. And I've talked with people like that said, you know, I really was pushed into marriage. I was pressured into marriage. But that's not the norm. Those are rare cases. Everybody gets married because you're crazy in love and you just want to be together and you just want that fairy tale life. You just want that companionship. You know, I love what Dr. Eckridge says in Love and Respect. Nobody comes to get married with this mindset. I hate you, you hate me, so let's get married and make each other miserable. Nobody does that. You know, that's not the motivation for getting married. It's not the driving force. People marry because they have hopes and they have dreams about life, about family, about love. That's what they do. But here's the reality that cannot be avoided, and is really part of our human nature. On the screen, guys, every man and woman walks down an aisle with their own dreams and desires about how marriage will fulfill their life. Each of them do that. It's just human nature. It's just how things work. The man's got his box of dreams and hopes. The woman's got her box of dreams and hopes. And they come down the aisle expecting the other one to get in their box. Right? That's exactly what's going on. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if it wasn't true, none of us would get married. None of us would walk an aisle thinking we got to get out of our box into their box because we don't know if we like everything in their box. I'm marrying that man to change him. I'm marrying that woman to bring her along to me. That's what everybody's thinking. That's just human nature. We have this mindset that we're going to get something out of marriage, right? We're going to get something, and that's okay. That's normal. Some of you just sat there and said, "You're right, Pastor, I got grief out of marriage." And that's not what you should expect from marriage. Marriage is going to give you something. Marriage is about getting something. Last week, I closed with this. Maybe you'll remember this. I closed with this. Couples that get married, that come together, should expect to get this: order, belonging, community, mutual responsibility, mutual support, mutual accountability, mutual warmth, mutual respect, mutual submission, mutual commitment, and love. That's what you should get out of marriage. That's what God intended for all married couples to get from marriage. That's the driving force of marriage, are those things. But the problem is that good-intentioned people that are crazy about each other when they get married, each deciding for themselves what the rules are going to be in order to get those things. So the guy's got his idea of what the rules are going to have to be in order to obtain those things, and the girl has her idea about what the rules are going to be in order to obtain all of those things. And therein lies the problem. And so when they don't get these things, everything feels like it's backfiring on them, and then we begin to have trouble. Something that we heard in the video this week was one of the gentlemen was speaking about couples coming to him wanting to get married, and they want to write their own vows. And he said, "No, I won't allow it. I don't either. And I've had this conversation with couples that have come to me and said, we want to get married, but we want to write their own vows. And I said, well, that's fine. Go find somebody else. Because I'm not going to do that. And I really appreciated what he had to say about that. Because people that want to choose to write their own vows do it because, and this is going to catch some of you off guard, because they think that a wedding is about them as a couple. How many of you believe that a wedding is about the couple? That the wedding is about the bride, that the wedding is about the groom, that it's their day, and it is their day. But a wedding isn't about the groom, and it isn't about the bride. A wedding isn't about the couple. You see, a wedding is about a covenant. And that covenant is thousands and thousands and thousands of years old. And that covenant has been entered into by couples for millenniums. And when a couple decides to get married and on their wedding day come together and stand before a minister and before their friends and their families, what they are doing is they are not making their own promises. They're entering into promises that have already been established. They're entering into a covenant that already exists. When a couple chooses to write their own vows, or tries to affect the vows in some manner or some way, what they're doing is they're trying to redefine marriage. They're trying to say, we don't want God's definition of marriage. We don't want God's covenant. We want our covenant. We want our promise. It's not a marriage. It doesn't fit the definition that has been designed by God as a marriage. You see, marriage has already been defined. And man didn't define it. Man didn't get the privilege or the rights to define what marriage would be or redefine what marriage should be. God said, it is my institution. It is my covenant. Let a man leave his father and mother and cleave unto his wife, and the two become one, and live under my covenant of marriage, one with another. You see, marriage is unchangeable. The standard for marriage has already been established. And we as men and women, we have no rights to change it. We simply enter into it. Is this making any sense? I mean, some of you got that little deer in the headlight look like, this guy's an idiot. What's wrong with this man? Some of you are sitting there like you never heard this stuff before. You see, the problem with couples getting married is there's far too much emphasis put on the couples, when the emphasis of a marriage ought to be put on God and the covenant. Now, maybe you guys, some of you may be starting to track with me thinking, okay, so if I violate my vows to my wife or to my husband, what you're saying is I'm sinning against God. I am breaking my covenant with God. Now you're on the bus with me. That changes it, man. That puts a lot more weight on the covenant, doesn't it? To know, I ain't cheating on her. I ain't cheating on him. I'm not breaking a vow with him. I'm not breaking a vow with her. I broke his vow. I violated his covenant of marriage. Guys, to help you understand this, if you are a foreigner and you come into the United States and you apply for citizenship, what do you have to do? You have to come into agreement with the Constitution of the United States. As a foreigner, do you get to change it? Do you get to add to it? Do you get to take away from it? You don't, do you? If you're going to be a citizen of the United States, you have to come into the Constitution. You have to come under the Constitution as it is written. You go to the VCU 101 class next week and you'd say, hey, pastor, I want to be a member of this church. Guess what? You don't get to make the rules or change the rules. You come in under the Constitution and bylaws that this church has established. You either agree with them and you agree to come under them, or you don't come in. You see what I'm saying? Are you tracking here with me? Guys, listen, on your outline, y'all thinking, oh my gosh, we're going to be here till 4 o'clock this afternoon. The game starts 5:30. He's just now getting to the outline. The thing that should be entered into as a covenant relationship is often being entered into as a contractual relationship. The thing that is being entered into as a covenant relationship is often being entered into as a contractual relationship. And there's a difference between covenant and contract. Huge difference. On your outline again, a covenant is a promise that you enter into that is not contingent on the other party's obligation. I've already said it. I'll say it again. You're entering into a promise, a vow, but your vow's to God. I, Ralph, take Diana. I repeated that. And those of you who are married repeated that. And when you did, you were making a vow to God. You were saying, I, Ralph, take Diana, God. For better, for worse, for richer, for poor, in sickness and in health, until death do we part. I make that promise. I'm coming under your promise. I'm coming into your covenant. And as a man, I'm going to do it. That's my role. And I'm going to be faithful to that. I promise you, my father. I will do what I'm supposed to with this woman based on what you have given me and told me to do and be. That's a covenant. That's coming into covenant. And here's the deal. I'm going to do that whether she does hers or not. You see, a covenant is not dependent upon the other ones fulfilling their obligation, because my vow is to him. A contract is dependent upon conditions in which two parties must do their part, or the contract becomes null and void. In a contract, you got to weigh out. See, a contractual marriage is no different than two people living together. There's no difference. If you enter into a contractual relationship, there's no more meat in that than there is if you just shack up, if you just come in and move in together. There's no vow. There's no covenant. Greg Smalley said this in the video. I love this. It's a great illustration. One, in regards to the difference between a covenant marriage and a contractual marriage, is that one, or living together rather than getting married, one is where you burn the ships in the harbor. There ain't no going back. You walk that aisle and you say, I do. You set the ships on fire and you burn them. Because at this point on, we got to work this thing out. We got to make this thing go. We're going to work through this. But when you don't get married, when you live together, and if you enter into a contractual relationship where you place conditions on one another, guess what? The ships are still moored in the harbor. And you can go get on and leave whenever you want. You see the difference between what God's covenant of marriage is and what a contractual agreement is? And far more couples are living under a contractual agreement than they are a covenant. And that's why divorce rates are so high. That's why families are so dysfunctional. Guys, marriage is very complex, but at the same time, it's really very simple. And I know that sounds like a paradox, but it's true. Marriage is complex, but it's also very, very simple. And even though something may be complex, it doesn't have to be difficult. You see, the complexity of marriage is due to the reality that men and women are wired to think differently than each other due to the fact that God has created them that way very intentionally. I know that may be news to some of you, but ladies, your husband does not think like you think. And guys, your wives do not think like you think. God intentionally created two different brains. And you're going to hear some funny stuff about that on February the 20th at the Valentine's banquet. I'm telling you, you'll be wetting down both legs when you leave. I mean, it's awesome. It is funny. But we're not the same, and we don't think the same. Guys, oh man, my mind just went in a direction that I don't think I want to go. Guys, the simplicity, when I talk about the simplicity of marriage, in comparison to the complexity of marriage, the simplicity of making a marriage fulfilling comes from the adventure of learning how it plays itself out in a relationship. Now, anybody go with me just then? Or did the train leave the station and you stayed on the dock? The simplicity of making marriage fulfilling comes from the adventure of learning how that will flesh itself out in everyday living. Marriage is an adventure, man. It's an amazing journey. I love marriage. I wish every man had a wife. I wish every woman had a husband. I love marriage. It is the greatest thing apart from salvation that God's ever given to man. It's an amazing thing. And it's an adventure. It's a journey, but it's an adventure. It's learning how to navigate through the difficulties. That's what's so cool about it. It's when you can get through certain things and then you stop and you look at each other and go, yeah, baby, high five. We did that. In coaching couples about marriage, and I'll speak to this just right at the end because we don't do marriage counseling around here. Marriage counseling implies that there's something wrong with you and you're broken. There ain't nothing wrong with you. If you're having marital problems, if you're in a struggle in your marriage, let me tell you, there's nothing wrong with you. You just might not have the tools that you need. You might not have the right coaching. You just might not have the right knowledge. That's what a coach does with an athlete. What the athlete does with the information is up to them. But a coach gives an athlete exercise. You want to be a pitcher? All right. Okay, then you're going to have to hit the weight room. You have to work out. You're going to have to be at practice every day. You're going to have to work on certain techniques. No, your form's not right. Look what you're doing here, man. I mean, the reason the ball's carrying like it is because of your form. So let me fix your form. Let me change your form. There's nothing wrong with the athlete. He's just not very good at this point. You see the difference? That's why I hate the word counseling. You take marriage counseling to a guy, and he would rather take a beating. He would rather just shoot me. Just shoot me. Because I'm going to go in there, and they're going to beat me up anyway. So just might as well shoot me. Don't tell your husband we need marriage counseling. Oh my gosh. It's not that your husband's broken. It's not that your wife is broken. It's just they need coaching. Change the form, and guess what? The ball starts going where it's supposed to go. The ball breaks the way it's supposed to break. And when you go into marriage with a coaching mentality, guess what? People get better. If they will do the exercises. If they will allow the adjustments to be made, they get better. So that's why we don't counsel here at VCU. We coach. Listen, guys, we often hear couples come together when we're coaching them and they say, my spouse has a problem. My husband's got a problem. We have women, or husbands say, oh, nope, she's got the problem, I don't. I've heard this stuff. She's the problem, she's got the problem. She just stopped this nonsense. We wouldn't have a problem. On your outline, guys, there's no such thing as a spouse having a problem. Let's just get that out on the table right now. There is no such thing as a spouse having a problem. If a problem exists, guess what? Both spouses have a problem. You see? You see what I'm saying? There ain't never a situation where one spouse has a problem. If a spouse has a problem, both have a problem. And until you begin to look at that, you know, I've had men, more men than women ever say this, but I've heard women say this to me. They say, it's his problem, not mine. It's her problem, not mine. I'm fine. And I just shake my head. Now, I don't say this to the women, but I will say this to the men. You're an idiot, man. You're an idiot. And men don't mind being called idiots. We call each other names all the time. See, if we don't call each other names, we think we're mad at each other. How come he didn't insult me? You know, how come he didn't call me stupid or something like that? You know, that's just how men work. They just get along. Women, you don't ever say that to women. Women never, ever insult each other. They insult women with other women away. And that's something men won't do very, very seldom. But you women, we'll talk about that later. If it is not purpose from the beginning of a marriage to embrace anything and everything that comes along as a couple, that comes along and you don't agree to handle this or tackle this together, you can expect your marriage to completely miss the mark that God has designed for it to hit. I guarantee it. You have to decide that early on in your marriage. I don't care what happens. I don't care what happens. You know, the Bible is an interesting book. There's so much stuff in it. There's drama and there's intrigue and there's suspense and there's some cool stuff in the Bible. I mean, it's an amazing, amazing book. But you know, I want to say something, and some of you Bible students and theologians are going to flip over backwards in your chair, so you might just pay attention to who's sitting in front of you. But sometimes the Bible teaches us about life from what it doesn't say as well as what it does say. Now, some of you your heart just stopped. But I want to tell you what I mean by that. I believe that the Bible is absolutely, completely sufficient to cover every issue of our life. Every issue of our life. I love the Word of God, and it is perfect in every way. But sometimes it feels like the Bible is remiss of the obvious. And if you're a student of the Bible and you study, you know what I'm talking about. Sometimes it feels like that the Bible is just like it's remiss of the obvious. And there's a reason for that. Because it's obvious. Because it's obvious. Let me give you an example. We're talking about marriage. Let's just talk about an example of marriage. Do you know, we'll throw it up on the screen, the Bible tells women to respect their husbands, but it doesn't tell men to respect their wives? And you'd think, well, hey, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, right? Hey, if the Bible's going to tell a woman to respect her husband, why don't the Bible tell the husband to respect his wife? It doesn't have to. It doesn't have to. As a general rule, it doesn't have to. And I'll explain that. But the Bible also tells men to love their wives, but it doesn't tell wives to love their husband. And you go check this out. You can check this out, but the Bible doesn't tell a woman to love her husband. The Bible tells a woman to respect her husband. And the Bible tells a man to love his wife, but it doesn't tell a man to respect his wife. Now, there seems like there's something that is missing or incomplete here, but there's not. You see, I just let that marinate for just a moment because I'm going to go on and talk about it. Here's why. As a general rule, now I know there's exceptions to the case, and or sometimes it gets kind of turned upside down, but as a general rule, men don't have to be taught to respect. They don't have to be taught that necessarily. It's actually in their nature. It's built into the way God designed men. And the Bible doesn't have to teach a woman to love because it's, as a general rule, built into the very nature of a woman to love. It's just a part of her makeup. And all you got to do is you just have to watch how boys and girls play and how they act and stuff. You see, the Bible's not going to speak to something that's a natural outflow. If it's part of the conditioning and the wiring of an individual, it doesn't need to say it because it's going to happen. Now, women, you are naturally wired to love. You are. I mean, you will love when, as a man, I would think, there ain't no reason to be loving him. You're going to love. I've had women that have been in abusive situations and they've been beat up and they've moved out and they've left for a while and they'll go right back a lot of times. And when you ask them, I don't think the dude's changed. Why are you going back? Because I love him. I've heard that so many times, because I love him. Seriously. I don't think I'd kill a man. And he said, well, I love him. You know, and I've had women sit with tears in their eyes, ready to divorce, ready to go to divorce. And I'd look at them and I'd say, you respect him? Nope. You love him? Yeah. Well, you're going to divorce him. I don't care. I love him. And, you know, you look at a man that's in that same situation and you say, do you love her? He says, nope, not no more. And say, well, tell me some things that you admire about her. Oh, he'll just start rattling off a list. Well, she's good with this, she's good at that. She's always been good at that. Yeah, she's smart, you know. And he'll start naming off things that would fit in a respect category. Because it's natural. It's natural. Every man going through divorce, without exception, can always tell me things about his wife that he respects. The woman that he's cheating on, the woman that he's left, the woman that he's wanting out of a relationship with, he will always tell me things that he respects about her if I ask him. It's an amazing thing. Let me give you an example. Danny Wymore called me the other day. And just to prove to you, guys, you ain't very loving. We ain't very loving creatures. It's not our default mode. Guys are not by nature loving individuals. Right, guys? When I tell a woman your husband needs your respect more than he needs your love, it just freaks them out. They just go ballistically crazy. What do you mean he doesn't need my love? I didn't say he didn't need your love. I said love is not at the top of that man's list. I guarantee it. If I can sit down and break it down with you as a couple, you will agree with me, and the man will be sitting there going, that dude's right. I don't need her love like I need her respect. I need her respect because respect is a lifeline to a man. Because that's how men relate to one another. That's how boys interact on a playground, playing with each other, but not girls. Girls, they don't care about the game. They care less about the game. It's all about the social activity to them. You know, one little girl says something hateful to another little girl. Man, you got a drama for 2 weeks. I'm serious. They don't care about the game. They'll never get back to the game. The game ain't no big deal. You know what guys do if they trash talk each other or disrespect each other? But guess what? We'll go back to the game. We'll go back to the game because, you see, it's just a respect thing. Guys are different. They react different. That's why guys shake hands and look each other directly in the eye when they shake hands with each other. And that's why women come up and they just hug all over each other and go, oh, I just love your top, and oh, your hair is so pretty. And oh, where did you get those shoes? Oh, they're gorgeous. I just love how you dress your girls, and oh, they're just beautiful. You see, they say loving things to each other. Guys walk up and say, man, you stink, you ugly. You know, what an idiot. Who would even think like that, man? And we as guys, we don't care. That's how we communicate. You know, it's all about respect. We call each other names all the time. And we think that's okay because as long as we respect one another and we as men sense that respect from one another, we're good. But don't come up and kiss me, and don't come up and tell me you like my shirt or you like the way these jeans fit me. Because if you do, I'm walking off and saying, this ain't normal. You see, we're different. Well, Danny calls me on the phone. Let me prove this point. Boy, I hope you guys ain't got no plans this afternoon. Danny calls me on the phone. He says, hey, Ralph, what's going on? I said, not much, man. What's happening? He goes, I got to have a dumpster. I'm looking for a dumpster. We're trying to clean out and remodel Megan and Jake's house, and baby's coming home, and I need a dumpster. They come in different sizes. I mean, what do they come in? Like 20, 30? I said, yeah, they come in 20, 30 yard stuff. We're talking about dumpsters. And I'm saying, call John Rice. I said, John Rice is an idiot. I said, he hoards stuff. He collects stuff. And after 2 years, what's he do? He goes out and he hires a dumpster, comes in. He throws all the stuff he collected 2 years ago away in the dumpster to make room for all the new stuff that he collected in the dumpster. And Danny goes, yeah, that's right. John's an idiot, ain't he? I said, yeah, he is. I said, just call John because John's an expert on getting dumpsters. And so he says, all right. He said, I'll call John. And I said, all right, cool. Man, talk to you later. See you. Bye. And we hung the phone up. Dinah's standing in the kitchen. Look at me. He goes, how's the baby? And I'm thinking, what baby? And she goes, the baby. How's the baby doing? You know, because Jake and Megan just had a baby, and we was all scared about the complications and stuff, and God just stepped in and did a cool thing there. But she goes, how's the baby? I said, I don't know how the baby is. Why? Did you ask him about the baby? I said, I didn't ask him about the baby. We were talking about a dumpster. You know, we don't talk about a baby and a dumpster in the same conversation. What's the matter with you? It's crazy. And she goes, I want to know about the baby. I said, I didn't even think about the baby. You know, we weren't talking about the baby. Now let me just kind of turn this around for you just a little bit. Let's just say Barb Wymore had called me and said, hey, Ralph. I said, yeah, Barb, what's going on? Number one, I wouldn't have told her she was ugly like I told Danny. But anyway, she calls and she goes, hey, Ralph, Danny's want me to call you and ask you, how do we find a dumpster? What size dumpster do we need to get and stuff like that? Well, I'd have told her the same thing and stuff. And then I said, all right, Barb, talk to you later. I'd have hung the phone up. Here's how that would have gone down. Barb would have turned around and looked at Danny with tears running down her face. And Danny would have been standing there and goes, what's the matter with you? And she would have said, our pastor doesn't love us. What? And she'd have said, our pastor doesn't love us. He doesn't care. He's insensitive. And Danny would have been standing there and he was going, well, what happened? Well, what's going on? And Barb would have said, he never asked about the baby. And Danny would have been looking at her like, oh, we didn't call him about the baby. I asked you to call him about the dumpster. Yeah, but he didn't ask about the baby. If he really loved us as a pastor, he would have asked about the baby. And Danny would have walked off going, what in the world is that all about? You see, that's the differences in the way men and women think. We don't think the same. You women can think about lots of stuff. You can have lots of conversations. 6 women at a table can have 3 conversations, and all 6 of the women know what's going on in all 3 of them conversations. They can't do that with men, man, I'm telling you. We can have one conversation with 6 guys sitting at the table. One dude's talking, 5 are listening. If 2 men start talking, 2 will eventually get up and leave the table because it's too noisy, it's too chaotic. And we can't handle all this data input. It's too much. You know, you guys got out of the box. You stepped outside the box I was in. And that's scaring me. So I'm leaving. I'm going outside. You see, we don't think the same way. Men and women have natural imputed tendencies that God places in them from birth. Our brains work completely different. You remember the lady in, I think it was one of the first videos, either the first or second video. And she was a brain surgeon, or I don't know what she was. But anyway, she was some kind of brain doctor. And she said, you don't need to tell me the gender of a patient. All you got to do is let me see the brain scan. Because she said there is a huge difference in the brain activity of men and women, of males and females. Now, some of you women just said, yeah, women, there's activity, men, there's no activity. That's how she identifies that. That's not what she meant. That is not what she meant. It's just the activity is different. We're in 1 lane and you guys are on a 6-lane highway. And she can pick that up by watching a brain scan. And so much stuff I'd love to tell you all this morning, but I ain't got time. But I want you to notice something. The Bible tells men to love their wives, never tells women to love their husbands. And the Bible tells wives to respect their husband, but never tells men to respect their wives. But I want you to notice something. The Bible tells both men and women to submit to each other. Now, some of you guys just flipped out, said, whoa, wait a minute. The Bible says wives submit to your husbands. Yes, it does. And I'll prove that to you, but it also tells you to submit to your wives. Now, I just ruined some lives, didn't I? Some of you men said, all right, I'm done, I'm cooked. Let's track this. Let's follow this. Here's what I need you to know. Men stink at loving. They don't do loving things. They're not good at it. We're not good at loving because we weren't wired that way. So we have to be told to pay attention and learn how to do loving things. Women are mean-spirited. I said that out loud, didn't I? Because y'all have this natural tendency to be critical. You do. I mean, you do. Women will look at each other, they'll compliment each other, and then if a woman, you know why women don't go to the bathroom by themselves? Because they don't want the other 2 women sitting at the table talking about them while they're gone. So come on, go with me. If you're with me, you can't talk about me, right? Come on, ladies, right? You guys by nature have a little bit of, you kind of got a tendency to be critical. And you don't necessarily mean to be hurtful or mean that way, but women are by nature a little more critical because they're not very good at respect. Men are pretty good at respect, and we're not so inclined to be critical necessarily as a general rule. But we are terrible at love. We don't do loving things. And it's something we got to learn. We have to learn. And you women have to learn to respect. You got to learn how does that flesh itself out in a way my husband gets it? Because I've had women tell me, but I do respect him. But when they start describing things and he starts getting permission to talk, she sits there with tears running down her face, and I didn't know that. I didn't know that you didn't feel respected by me. I didn't know that I was disrespecting you by saying those things. I'm just trying to make you better. Don't try to make your husband better, guys. You're wasting your time. Don't try to make us better. We're probably as good as we're going to get, so you just got to try to get the best you can out of us. I mean, that's just how we are. But let's follow this through in Scripture. Why does the Bible not say those things to men and women, but it does tell both of us to submit to one another. Let's look at Scripture, Ephesians 5:25. It says, husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself up for us. In 1 Peter 3:1, it says, in the same way, you wives be submissive to your own husbands, so that if any of them are disobedient by the word, they may be won without a word by the behavior of their wives, as they observe your chaste and what? Respectful behavior. Now look down to Ephesians 5:33. Nevertheless, each individual among you is to what? Love his wife, even as himself, and the wife must see to it that she what? Respects her husband. So here you have here you have the scriptural reference and foundation for how we are to live as husbands and wives, how we're to function. We've been given our instructions. We've been told what we need because of what we lack. And so we're given this direction, if you will. But here's what's interesting. When it comes to submission, the Bible tells both of us to practice submission to each other. Now look very carefully go back to 1 Peter chapter 3, and I want you to look at verse 1, and then we're going to look at verse 7. And we got to see what the context of this passage that Peter wrote in 1 Peter chapter 3. It says, in the same way. Pay attention to those first four words. In the same way, you wives, be submissive to your own husbands, so that if any of them are disobedient to the word, they may be won without a word by the behavior of their wives. And we just read what that was, chaste and respectful behavior. Now drop down to verse 7. Look at what it says here. You husbands, in the same way. It's important to see those four words. In the same way. Live with your wives in an understanding way as with someone weaker. Now, ladies, that doesn't mean you're less. What he's talking about there is physical. In most, as a general rule, of course, some of you women probably mean enough to beat your husbands up, but Debbie Ramsey, for instance, scares me to death. But because I watched her go through a self-defense class, and oh my goodness, I thought he was going to have to call first responders. But as a rule, men are stronger than women, and men have a tendency to use that as a tool. I'm bigger, I'm stronger, I can intimidate you. And they use that. And that's what he's saying, guys. Live in an understanding way as with someone weaker, since she is a woman, and show her honor as a fellow heir, equal, lateral, as a fellow heir of the grace of life, so that your prayers will not be hindered. Now here's the question. What does Peter mean when he says, in the same way? We got to look and see what's he been talking about leading up to this passage. Here's what he's been talking about, submission. Go look at it for yourself. He's been giving instruction in areas of submission. You see, in chapter 2, up to this point, he's been talking about submitting to governments, submitting to masters. Wives, submit to your husbands. Husbands, submit to your wives. In the same way. It's what I mean when I say for marriage, you should be getting mutual submission. Doesn't change the role. The roles are there for a reason. But there's mutual submission. Before we walked up on the stage, Dinah was going to come up here and she was going to help me with the Valentine's thing. I didn't dictate to her what to say. If I had of, you wouldn't have seen that, I'm telling you. But she looks over at me and she goes, I get the mic first. Okay. And I submitted to that. I submitted. You see, mutual submission should be a part of a marital relationship. If it's to be a healthy relationship. If it's to be a strong and a powerful relationship. And that's what Peter's talking about coming into chapter 3. In the same way, just as you submit to government, just as you submit to masters, in the same way, ladies, submit to your husband. In the same way, husbands, submit to your wives. In the same way. Now, the first step to being able to simplify the complexity of the marriage or the marriage relationship is to be able to learn how you do this stuff. How does this flesh itself out? And it sounds simple, but somehow it ends up getting complicated in the marriage as you move through day in and day out living. And the reason that it gets complicated is because we all want what we all want, right? That's where it gets complicated. It's really that simple. We just want what we want. And when we do, we push aside the very tools that God gives each one of us to have it all, to get it all. Man, it got quiet in here. These instructions on your outlines, guys, these instructions that God gives to each spouse is not contingent on the other spouse's obedience or the lack thereof. They're not. I'm to be what God has called me to be. It doesn't matter if Diane is or not. I'm in a covenant with him, one he's established. And the same is true for the wife. Your spouse is not the enemy, people. I don't care what he has done. I don't care what she has done. Satan is the enemy. Satan is he's the attacker. He's the one that's the accuser. And here's the deal. How much better chance do you have of defeating him if you're standing together, addressing the issue, addressing the problem that you exist? Let's just talk about some of the enemies or some of the tools of the enemy. Let's say that both of you, a man and a woman, both of you together decided to fight the enemy together. And the enemy is using the tool of addiction in your marriage. Whatever the addiction is. Let's say that the Satan is using the tool of addiction. The husband has an addiction or the wife has an addiction. What have we learned? You both have the problem. What if the enemy uses the tool of financial hardships? Or what if he uses the tool of marital unfaithfulness? That's a tough one to get past, isn't it? That's a tough one to fight together when one or the other spouse has not been faithful. What if the husband has unloving behavior? Or what if the wife has disrespectful behavior? Or what if there is a loss of mutual love in the marriage? If both people, both spouses in the relationship will see it for what it is and come together remembering what they had said they would do before God and to God in the beginning stages of that marriage, and will come back together even if the things are there, even if the love is gone, even if it's hard, even if it's painful, but stand together and say, together we're going to work against this enemy. I guarantee you in most cases, if not all cases, the enemy would go down in flames. He would go down in flames. I've had guys tell me, I don't love her anymore. I say, I don't care. Well, isn't that important? Yeah, and it will be again, but right now it's not important. It's not the most important thing. I've had women tell me, I don't love him anymore. I don't have any feelings for him anymore. I don't care. We can fix that too. It can all come back. I guarantee it. It can all come back. You just got to get the right coaching techniques. And you got to be willing to do them. And it'll all come back. Now, I don't care what's happened. I don't care what the past has been. The problem is most couples are trying to fight the enemy using the wrong weaponry. You think by using the world's tactics, you're going to get your marriage to work better. And you will not. Too many people are fighting with the wrong weaponry. Here's what you do. You take this to your father. You see, the wrong weaponry is blaming each other, attacking each other, holding each other responsible, or refusing to take responsibility yourself. You go to your father. And if you can't go as husband and wife, then you go by yourself. But you go and you resolve to use the right weaponry. And you go to your father. And you be honest and you tell him what you're feeling and what's going through your head and what's happening right now, but you resolve to use his weaponry and to do it his way. And then, if you're a husband, you start loving your wife. Whether she deserves it or not, whether she's earning anything in your mind, it doesn't matter. You start loving your wife. And women, you start respecting your husband. And he may not be worthy of your respect, but respect him anyway. And show him. Let him know, I respect you. Let her know that you love her. You know what would happen in most cases like that? They might come back together. But here's what will happen in every case. Married, it's on your outline, guys, married people would stop sinning against God. See, if you're using the wrong weaponry in your marriage, you're sinning against God. Because the covenant is with him, remember? You're violating a covenant, a vow that he owns that belongs to him. You know, a follower of Christ cannot expect God to honor their marriage if they choose to live in disobedience to his design. These aren't suggestions, guys. These are directives to put us into that position that God is wanting us to be in. And sometimes I know it's difficult because sometimes a person in a marriage or a couple will become so disillusioned with what's going on in their marriage that they don't think there's any more left to give. There's nothing more they can do. They're just empty. They're done. They don't have anything else to put on the table. And I know that happens. But listen to me very carefully, and it's on your outline, guys. When you say that your marriage could never change, you just said more about what you believe about God than you do about your circumstances. See, some of you bankrupted your marriage and you don't feel like you got anything left, then turn to your father and let him put some more in the tank. That's what you do. You turn to your father and you let him put some more in the tank. If you're empty, then ask him to fill you up again. And trust him to do it. You have to trust him to do it. You have to embrace your role. You've got to learn to obey your father, what he's given you to contribute to your marriage. And you start honoring God first. And as you honor God first, you will find out that it will become easier for you to honor each other. But it has to begin with him. And let me just give you some more tools to put in your box. If you're in trouble, if things aren't going the way you expected them to go or you want them to go, stop focusing on your spouse's weaknesses. Because the reality is, to most degrees, those weaknesses might not ever change much. Focus on their strengths. Look at what they bring to the table. Look at what the positives are that they contribute to the marriage. What do they bring to the table? Focus on those and just embrace those. Open up and dialogue about how the enemy is attacking you. And this is uncomfortable. Diane and I have to do this when there starts to be a riff or disagreement or one of us isn't quite firing on all 8 cylinders and stuff. Sometimes we do things inadvertently to each other. I do unloving things to her. I know that surprises some of you guys, as sensitive as a person as I am. But sometimes I do some unloving things. And sometimes she'll do some disrespectful things. And that I know that surprises you because this woman's perfect in every way. But sometimes she does some disrespectful things. And so we have to give each other permission to dialogue about those things and say, what you did the other day or what you said the other day, that stung. And she'll say to me, I'm not feeling love. You're mean. You're mean. I don't tend to be, but I can be. See, it's okay for me to be mean to Paul. He deserves it. But it's not okay for me to be mean to Diana. But sometimes it'll carry over. And I'll say something that it's like, why in the world did I just say that? It wasn't loving. Dialogue about those things. Remind each other. Hold one another accountable to those things. Guys, it's okay. Guys, you need to make her feel like you can't breathe without her. You ought to be making your wife feel like she is the only woman in the world you want to be with, sleep with, and play with. I mean, it's just, she's it. Without her, you have to make her understand that if something happened to her, you would stop breathing. You would. You just feel like, oh my gosh, I'll stop breathing if she's gone. You got to make her feel that and know that. And ladies, stroke your husband. My gosh, can you imagine how you are cheating yourself by not stroking your husband? Because the more you stroke your husband, the more money he'll spend on you. I guarantee it, man. I'm the dude, man. Make him feel like the dude. Make him feel like, man, you're the only man in the world for me. You're the only man in the world I ever want to be with. Even more than George Strait. That's the inside joke. I said that out loud, didn't I? Oh, man. Sorry. I'm just glad he ain't my neighbor. I'd have trouble, I'm telling you. Placing ourselves under the hand of God as husbands and wives will bring so much more to the table, guys. It just brings so much more to the table. Here's your takeaway. I'm going to get you out of here. I just want to shut this thing down, or I'm going to have to buy y'all lunch. God will give you the grace to do what you need to do in the moment for the moment. Does that make sense to you? I know you might be in a struggle right now. I know that things might be difficult, but I'm telling you, if you go to your Father, He will give you the grace to do in the moment what you need for the moment. And that's all you need to worry about is the moment. Don't worry about a year from now. Don't worry about 2 years from now. Just tell Him I need grace for the moment. Help me with the moment. Now, in conclusion, when a pastor says in conclusion, that means we have 20 more minutes. In conclusion, God has blessed us here at VCU with some amazing married couples that are getting it done right. We are so fortunate as a church to have some awesome couples that are doing things well. And I'm very, very proud of them. And these are couples that are enjoying a level of intimacy that few people get to experience in marriage. And so here's why I said that.